I'm excited that I get to talk about both topics, C&D and C&I. I am the meat in the sandwich. Thank you for the intro, Jim. So as Jim mentioned, I have a background in retail. So all of the solutions that I try and implement for my customers, I really try and ensure they land into operations effectively, because there's what works on paper and what works with boots on the ground, which I'm sure a lot of people in the room can appreciate. My customers are national retail customers, which really helps because that's what I used to do. I used to stack shelves and unpack trucks, so I have that operational experience. But they are also interested in meeting their sustainability goals. So they have corporate sustainability goals that they want to meet. They need to see the action turn into numbers on paper to get the results, to get us funding, to get us improved results for their customers as well. So even though I'm talking about construction waste today, I'm actually really talking about change management. I'm going to be talking about making data-driven decisions, about making processes that make the changes easier for our team members. I'm going to talk about engaging people, because really, without people, the change isn't really happening, right? Oh, I got it first time. So a little bit of background about my customer at a very high level. My customer is a national retailer. They have over 700 stores across 4 different brands. They have diversion targets that they want to meet. And their core waste is based around their business, which is retail. So it's primarily secondary packaging. It's cardboard, it's plastic, it's paper, it's really light stuff. What we were finding was we were doing all of this really hard work to try and improve recycling in stores. And anyone here who's tried national initiatives will know trying to create change across 700 stores with thousands of employees is a real pain. What we were finding was we were doing all of this work to create, implement new recycling streams into stores, to get incremental behaviour change, and then someone would order a bloody general waste skip for 2 tonnes and ruin an entire month's worth of performance for a store. And we were going, what's going on? How is this happening? And not really understanding the root cause causing this impact. So when you talk about numbers and you have a store doing 200, 300 kilos of light materials coming out of a store, and then you have the store next to them doing 2 tonne of concrete waste in the same week, you really have to stop and go, what are we focusing our energy on, and are we spending it on the right things? So that problem that we had of WTF guys who ordered this skip became the solution. We had to go, this skip of general waste that's blowing my diversion numbers in my corporate report is actually able to help us improve our diversion numbers. Because what we found was, in C&I, when someone orders a skip, we automatically assume that it's either product waste or it's packaging waste. And we didn't stop and realise, what are these guys ordering the skips for? And we realised that there was a lot of construction and demolition projects going on under the radar that we weren't being kept in the loop of. And because they're temporary projects, we weren't setting up the processes to get that material to the right destinations. These things were just happening behind the scenes. And as you can imagine, if you've got a really large customer, a really large organisation, some of this stuff flies under the radar. There's no way I'm across what's happening at 700 stores, but the data told a different story, and that helped us to make the right decisions and focus on the right things. So as I'm assuming a lot of people in this room know, C&D waste is highly recoverable waste. We're talking about soil, timber, metal, concrete, really great stuff, really bulky stuff, really heavy stuff. And what we wanted to do was leverage established solutions to improve diversion rather than trying to reinvent the wheel. Anyone who works in retail at the moment, it's already been mentioned a couple of times. Thank you for your note about soft plastics. The next frontier for my customer was, let's recycle soft plastics, right? But the 200 kilos of soft plastics versus the 2 tonne of concrete, we were going to have to go and create solutions that didn't exist yet, and collection methodologies that didn't exist yet to solve a problem when we had one right under our noses. So what I'm talking about today is standing back and looking at the solutions you already have that might not be as black and white for what you thought you should be focusing on. Because C&D is a large a large contributor to waste in Australia. It's currently about 35% of total waste in Australia. It is a really large industry. There's a lot of investment in infrastructure to ensure that material can be diverted. Cleanaway are actually established C&D as a standalone business unit in the last few years because we're really investing in partnerships between our collections and the infrastructure that our disposal partners have to ensure the circularity of these materials. So you can see here the Grasshopper truck. That's one of the businesses that Cleanaway's acquired as part of getting more wheels on the ground to execute C&D services. But in the C&I sector, we need to make sure we're collaborating between those two. This picture here is like pretty clearly describing what I mean by the differences in the services. When we have commercial services for this customer, we're setting up the processes as a bit of a set and forget. It's standardized services. These services are available in most places. I think out of the 700 stores, I've got 3 stores that I can't provide a cardboard service to. So it's quite standardized. Whereas when you're looking at skip services, it's one-off services. The services are based on the geographical area of what's available, and quite often the loads are mixed. So like I said before, when you order a skip, sometimes that just gets collected as general waste because it's a skip, rather than what is in the skip. When we have commercial and industrial services, we really define what that service is before collections occur, because we have source separation at the customer. When we talk about skip work, we really need to be more inquisitive about what is going in the bin before we allow services to occur. Anyone, well, everyone in this room who works in waste, if you've got temporary waste services, temporary skips because you're working on a project, you probably just want your skip to get serviced because sometimes the bar's that low. If you're in like a regional area, if you're on a project that's really fast moving, you just want the bin emptied. Like that is sometimes success when you're in a project, is my bin empty? Like, so we really had to lift the bar from just getting a bin service to making sure we were not only ensuring that we were capturing as much material for separation, but that we were also capturing the data behind that separation. And next up on the agenda is Simon, who's going to be talking a lot more about the data behind C&D and how much more opportunity we have to improve in this space. When you have a cardboard bin, it's very clear, consistent pathway. You have a cardboard bin that's labelled by cardboard, gets picked up by a cardboard truck, gets taken to a cardboard disposal location, and guess what? We invoice it as cardboard, and then we report it as cardboard. When you get a skip, well, it's a skip. So what's in it this week? Today we're doing flooring. It's got flooring in it. It's got concrete in it. Next week we're doing fixtures. It's got metal in the bin. So that's evolving as the project evolves. And the diversion of that skip isn't as linear. It's not binary. It's not, is this bin recycled, yes or no? It's, well, what was in it today? And did that get recycled? Did it get taken to the right facility? Did we capture the data? I guess the takeaway from this slide is C&I services can be a bit set and forget of setup is important. And what I found with the C&D was it was very touch point sensitive. Every touch point along the way we had to get right because they're temporary services. So what did we want to do? We wanted to ensure that all skip waste that we had for this customer was getting the maximum diversion possible. Sounds pretty simple, right? We're a waste company. The challenges that we faced, quite often waste is an afterthought, especially on a project. If you've done a construction project, I mean, if you've even renovated your bathroom, right? You know what I mean? You have so much going on. It's a feat of its own to execute a project. Just getting your bin serviced can be important. And then you also have to think about cost. So whenever you add additional waste services, you have to ask yourself the question, am I adding cost to this project? Then you think about who's involved. So one of the issues we had with this customer was there was decentralized execution of the project. So in this example, the customer was often subcontracting the construction work to a construction company. Then they might be requesting skip work from us. Then they're asking the landlord, is there space for that bin? The people requesting the bin were different to the people using the bin, were different to the people reporting on the bin. And because of that decentralized accountability, it was really difficult to get everyone on the same page. Process inconsistency, I'll be honest, because this was an ad hoc thing, it was not part of the BAU work for this customer, there weren't clear processes. What we found out when we brought this to the customer's attention was they had 150 stores that they were going to be refitting in the next 18 months that we didn't know about. Once we called this out as an issue, we were able to say, okay, we really need to get some processes in play to catch these things before they happen. And changing when there's inertia. So I really should call this changing when there's momentum. When we spoke to people around making this change, the bin was already getting picked up, so to them there was no problem. I just called this guy. I just asked for a skip. So making change when there's no real problem to the person that needs to make the change can be a problem. Oh. Yes. Okay, so for us, success didn't just become emptying the bin. It was ensuring as much was diverted as possible, and then we captured the data. Because not only do we need to ensure we're getting the right outcomes with the waste, which we actually were in a lot of cases, because as a disposal, we wanted to avoid landfill because it's often more expensive. So oftentimes we were diverting the material already, we just weren't capturing it. Because as a C&I service, it's very binary. It's a cardboard bin, it's a general bin. In C&D, it's a skip. Where did it go? How much of it was recycled? Because it was so binary in our reporting, we weren't actually capturing the good stuff we were already doing within a service. So what did we do? We had to focus on making data-driven decisions. This meant focusing on volume and focusing where solutions already existed. So when you focus on volume, it's talking about focusing on construction material rather than the soft plastics, right? Because that's going to make the biggest bang for buck. Focusing on solutions, again, focusing on things that we already have solutions for, rather than focusing on something like soft plastics, which is still an evolving market. We're still trying to figure out collection methodologies. And then identification for accountability. So like I said, we'd discover these tons and tons in our reports and we'd go, who did this? And half of our drama was trying to figure out who ordered the skip in the first place. We had to understand who did it so we could intervene in that process. There were refits happening, there were new stores happening, there were different brands ordering different things. Clear processes, so we had to define standards. When I say define standards, this is having like a hard conversation with your customer, day one, figuring it out before you then go and instruct other team members within their organisation. So as an example, we had to say to the customer, do you expect every contractor that you subcontract to achieve the recycling performance that you want to achieve for your company? Yes, okay. What about if it costs more? Let's have that discussion now, so then we can tell all the people that I try to share this process with that you have agreed that this is the direction we want to go in. So it's not just communicating, it's deciding and giving people authority to follow the process, even if it sometimes costs more or sometimes takes longer. Interrupting inertia is about identifying the root source of the request and interrupting it. The other part of this is making it easier. If I want to go and tell someone to do something differently with a skip that they're requesting, I need to give them so much information or so much clarity that them following my process is easier than them just doing what they've always done. So this is templates that make sure they get their bin collected at the time they want. So not only did we implement changes that helped us say, when you request this skip, say these words, and then when it gets to the depot, it'll be collected as this waste stream. We also said, hey, if you use this format, we'll make sure we collect it within the delivery windows that you want us to. So it actually helped them with what they were trying to achieve. So they wanted to follow our process because it helped them. The data challenge, and my good friend Simon here will talk about this even more as well, we really had to identify the data from the lowest common denominator. So sometimes I don't know this stuff's going on. How do I find out about it? And the two places that I can identify the service is when it's being requested and when it's being invoiced. It didn't happen unless someone asked for it, and it didn't get done unless someone's paying for it. So those were the 2 pain points that I jumped into to try and intervene. I went to find out, based on the data, who was requesting it, and then I spent my time with those people to understand what they needed and interrupt the request before it started. Then to find the data, which is sometimes very painful to understand where the waste went, how much of it was recycled. We started with the invoice and we worked backwards from there. So from the invoice, we could then find who requested it, what location it went to, and then work with our partners to identify how much of that was diverted. Engaging people, so we all needed to be focused on the same outcome. This is communicating the collective decision. Like I said before, getting the authority and the decision making from the decision makers and then sharing that with the business. Individualized accountability. This is kind of like, did you guys watch the show The Weakest Link? Yeah, this is, we're all a link in the chain, so everyone's responsible for their part to play. But we're not going to hold, like I'm not going to hold everyone accountable. You're not going to hold everyone accountable. It's about creating a chain. So for me, I had to hold the person that provided me this data set accountable, because if they didn't do that, I couldn't do this. We got the project managers of the projects to hold their contractors accountable for requesting diversion. Then the contractors would hold the service providers accountable for giving diversion options. That was all reinforced by the contracts that were required to be fulfilled by the customer. So we created a chain of accountability where if you didn't do your part, someone noticed. And then lastly, spotlight for momentum. That's a fancy way of saying escalating nicely. So the only way to resolve bottlenecks that are not changing, if someone in the chain isn't doing their part, we try to use the carrot more than the stick. So when we're in national meetings, when we're in quarterlies, we really try to advocate for the change and just spotlight where a bottleneck is, rather than calling out anyone through escalation. Kind of the positive approach. I'll just finish on the results. So the first year we only did 6 months of that, so 120 tonnes additional we captured in diversion. For that part of the business, we increased the diversion. It was already at about 50%, but because we were getting engaged in the request, we were able to lift that from 50 to 80%. And for this customer, that actually made a 3% improvement across their total business. This one project piece of work they were doing made that impact across their whole business, more so than we would have expected the soft plastics to do. This financial year, we're looking at that being probably double, so around a 6% improvement. Takeaways are, people, it's sometimes waste is an afterthought, and we need to make it easier for people to do something rather than harder, which is something you mentioned as well. Process, giving people clarity actually makes the process more sustainable, because if someone moves on, it needs to be really clear to the next person what needs to be done. And data, the devil's in the detail. Make your decisions with data and capture your data, which I'm going to pass the mic to Simon to talk about. Thanks, guys.